Welcome back to BadgerBlitz TV, your Rivals.com destination for all things Wisconsin athletics. I'm Matt Perkins, joined as always by BadgerBlitz.com publisher, editor-in-chief John McNamara. Good to see you as always, buddy.
Good to see you too, Matt.
Tough weekend for a lot of Badger fans out there. Obviously, with the Wisconsin loss to Alabama in pretty one-sided fashion affair there at Camp Randall Stadium. They had a lot of legends in the house, and that didn't really help. Some pretty tough turnovers for the Badgers, especially. And then, the big thing that happened early in the game was the injury to starting quarterback Tyler Van Dyke. He is now out for the season with a right ACL tear, which is a real shame for him and a real shame for this Badger team, which is now left with one quarterback on the roster who has taken collegiate snaps in Braedyn Locke. And he got, a fair bit of run last year, subbing in for an injured Tanner Mordecai. And he got a lot of run against Alabama, but it didn't necessarily go super great, John. So let's just talk about sort of the state of play for Wisconsin and Tyler Van Dyke and sort of where they go from here.
Well, they go to Braedyn Locke, and like you mentioned, Matt, Mabry Matoyer is behind him, the true freshman quarterback, and obviously he has not gotten any college reps, and Cola Cruz there as well. They have a walk-on, so that room is depleted, and now you're one play away from having to play a true freshman in a Big Ten football game. So it's certainly not an ideal situation for Wisconsin. You started the season, and the talk around the camp was we feel like we have two starting quarterbacks. Well, one went down, and now you have Braedyn Locke. Obviously, this bye week comes at a very good time where you'll have 2 weeks to prepare for USC, and more importantly, I think 2 weeks to not design, but to, I guess, tweak the offense and set it up to hopefully put Braedyn Locke in a position to have some success. Just kind of watching that Packers game, and I think there's probably a lot of Packers fans watching this. A lot of the ways that Matt LaFleur designed the offense for Malik Willis, I think that Wisconsin fans probably hope that Phil Longo can design something similar for Braedyn Locke to have some success, because I think he walked into a game plan that was designed for Tyler Van Dyke, and to have to adjust on the fly, I think that's very difficult. I think they wanted to do things with Van Dyke that they probably weren't able to do with, Braedyn Locke. So we'll see. I mean, it's going to be a tall test to beat USC, and it's going to be even more difficult now with Braedyn Locke as your starting quarterback moving forward here.
I think Malik Willis, though, is a little bit more willing to run than Braedyn Locke is, and I think I think that's tough. I think that because even with Van Dyke, the quarterback run game was part of the equation. Maybe not a huge part of the equation, but with Mordecai and with Van Dyke, it was part of the equation. It has not been with Braedyn Locke yet.
No,
and
right.
You saw him on Saturday when there were times that they were clearly running a read option and the ends are crashing down and he still wouldn't pull it. And I think that if he is going to have success, he going to have to be a more willing runner. And then the second thing for me is that Locke has way too many passes batted down at the line of scrimmage. Way too many. I counted 6 this weekend. Maybe it only was 5. Either way, if it's 5 or 6 on 24 attempts, that's not good. Or on 25 attempts or whatever it was. That means that because those passes have no chance of reaching receivers. None. And so, I don't know if that's an arm angle thing, if that's a pass blocking thing, if that's a scheme thing. But that, to me, is one of the biggest things that's going to need to be worked out quickly.
Yeah, that and pocket presence. He looked like he was thrown into a game against Alabama. But again, he had a year, where he was, playing last year, and he saw reps. He's played against good defenses, but the pocket awareness, in addition to the stuff getting batted down, in addition to just kind of being limited in terms of what they want to do, the RPOs seem to be, I don't know that you can necessarily run that, because like you talked about, Matt, I don't think that Braedyn Locke is very comfortable running the football in comparison to a guy like, Tyler Van Dyke. So there's a lot that you got to get cleaned up there. I think that, you've seen Locke look more steady, calmer in previous games from this past season, but there were a lot of things that were alarming, in that Alabama game. Now, if you're an optimist, you can chalk it up to a number of different things getting thrust in. Playing Alabama, they won't play a defense like Alabama, the rest of this year, but Braden's going to have to, figure some things out and really kind of dial in for Wisconsin to have a chance, once they hit this Big Ten stretch now.
Yeah, he will hopefully, obviously, not have his running backs lose 2 fumbles in the game, because those were both absolute killers for Wisconsin. I mean, you think about, especially that Malusi fumble, just seemed like Badgers had just gotten Alabama to punt, and first play from scrimmage, it's give them the ball right back to him, or second play from scrimmage, whatever it was. That was a real tough hurdle to overcome. But let's move outside of the quarterback position. What other changes, John, do you expect to see on the field, whether it's personnel or scheme wise, between now and when the Badgers play USC in about 11 days, 12 days, whatever it is?
Well, I think there is what fans hope to see and what we may actually see. And being on the message boards, listening to feedback and talking to people, I think specifically on the defensive side of the ball, people want to see Christian Allegro and they want to see Tackett Curtis. And obviously those 2 are the backups to Jaheim Thomas and Jake Chaney. And look, I think that's something that fans want to see. Now, will we see that? I don't know, but I think Curtis and Allegro give you a little bit more pop, a little bit more juice there, a little bit more ability to create plays. Now, I think if you dive deeper into it, and if you are obviously Mike Tressel, maybe you feel Jake Chaney and Jaheim Thomas are going to be in the right place more often at the right time. I don't know, but I guess if there are some wrinkles there on defense, maybe you see those linebackers specifically on the inside play a bit more than they have. You go to outside linebacker, who can you put in there to create some juice? I mean, to get some pressure on the football. Now, look, against South Dakota, they had 7 pressures, according to Pro Football Focus. Against Alabama, they had 6. I mean, they are just getting that pass rush is almost non-existent. So maybe you put a guy like Jaheim Thomas on the outside to try to get to the pass rusher that allows you to maybe get Christian Allegro on the field, because I just think they have to do something different there. And look, I've come on here and I've come on other places and said, the guys that they brought in, Leon Lowry, John Pius, those guys are going to be, a significant upgrade from what they've had. And that just has not been the case. So will they find a way to create a pass rush? I think putting Thomas on the outside is one idea on some obvious passing downs, but look, there's a lot of question marks there, in addition to a defensive line that below average at best, I would say right now.
It's crazy to me that Aaron Witt has been such a key piece after being injured for so long and actually looking better than most of the outside linebackers, at least against the run. He's proven that he's, really able to do his job. And, I'm curious to see if, they start filtering in new guys. Like, do we see an Anelu Lafaele? Do we see some of the other, do we see an Ernest Willer? Like what happens there? Because I think you're right. They may move Thomas to outside on obvious passing downs. We haven't seen them do that yet, but I don't know. And that coupled with the D line, and it's, there were a couple of glimpses and flashes maybe, but still in the run game, they were just getting gashed up the middle. And I just don't know if they have the bodies to deal with it. And I don't know where those bodies are going to come from.
Maybe more Brandon Lane snaps, but, maybe there's a reason why he's not playing all that much. He'd be the one guy I think you could turn to and say, okay, at least we think from an outsider's perspective that he could maybe add a little bit there. But look, there's just not a ton to work with, like you said, Matt. Going back to the fan, I guess, point of view, I think a lot of the fans just say, hey, let's play this 2024 class, every single one of them, and just kind of see what happens. But I guess I would just say, look, a lot is still on the table for this team, even though you're coming off a drubbing against Alabama. I mean, you're just going into Big Ten play. There's everything that you want is still available to you. And I'm not saying that, this Big Ten slate's going to play out all that well, but I think it's far too early to say, I only want to see Darian Dupree and Dylan Jones at running back. I want to see Kevin Haywood start at left tackle. I want to see Xavier Lucas start. I want to see Thomas Heiberger play, even though that he's injured. I get that. But I don't think we're there just yet. I don't really know that you'll get to that point in that season where, this play the young guys and scrap everything else. We'll just have, it's a week by week thing. Things can change. Things can improve. They can go in the other direction. So I would just caution fans that we're heading into just week 4, and we haven't played a Big Ten game yet. So let's just pump the brakes on that just a touch.
Well, let's flip from the on the field action for the Alabama game to the on the sidelines action, I guess we could say, with a bunch of unofficial visitors who were in Wisconsin for the game. The staff definitely brought in some higher priority targets, I would say, here for the weekend on their guest list. Obviously, a guy we've talked a lot about is Gavin Mueller, the tight end from the Chicagoland area. I know you had a piece on him up on BadgerBlitz.com. What was sort of your overall sort of things that you heard from the recruits who were in town this weekend and sort of the vibe you got from those guys?
Yeah, this is a classic fan question. Talking a lot about fans today, I suppose. But, what happens when a game that a recruit goes to and it gets completely out of hand and they get blown out? I would say more often than not, and the guys that I, connected with, on Sunday after the Wisconsin game, they can't recall the final score, or they're just not that invested into that. I mean, they are there to, take part in the pregame stuff, to talk to the coaches, to, really soak in the atmosphere of a game day at Wisconsin. And look, they're 17, 18-year-old kids who aren't like these diehard Wisconsin fans like fans are. So they have a different perspective on the game. And so their point of view is very different than what the typical Wisconsin fan is. So they don't come away from those visits traditionally, and I've been doing this for a really long time, saying, I had an awful visit because Wisconsin lost, or I had an awful visit because Team X I visited lost. It doesn't work that way for these young kids. And so, look, if that game was tighter, I'm sure they would have kept them close and put them right there in front of the field. But there are other ways to maximize the visit if the game does get out of hand. And look, from all accounts, Madison was great. They presented very well. It was a beautiful day. So there are a lot of things and positive things that these recruits took away from the visit in general, outside of the final score, which again, traditionally is just never that important to a recruit when they're on a visit.
Are there any other guys from this weekend that you think we should really be keeping our eyes on? I mean, one guy for me that is, I think, important to at least, monitor going forward is going to be Jacob Alexander, who I don't know if they like him at defensive end or linebacker, but I think he has the potential to be someone who really blossoms this fall.
Yeah, I got a chance to talk to him, and like you mentioned, Matt, an interesting guy. 6'4", 225 pounds. Those are the type of kids that Wisconsin will traditionally bring in at outside linebacker and try to play him there. I think that's on the table for him. When I talked to him, he said a lot of schools like me at stand up outside linebacker. The interesting thing is EJ Whitlow is the lead contact there. That doesn't necessarily mean that they project him to play defensive line. But, a kid that he mentioned, Wisconsin, Illinois, and Michigan as the schools that are kind of most consistently in contact with him. Shahn Alston is another kid, that running back from Ohio. Wisconsin had him up in the spring, again, obviously on Saturday for a visit. And, in a 2026 class, running back, I think, is going to be pretty important because you may not take one in 2025. You talked about Gavin Mueller, I think. Wisconsin is a very good position in his recruitment. His teammate was also there, Zachary Washington, the wide receiver. And, I think he's one of Wisconsin's, top receiving targets in this class, if not the top guy in terms of, mutual interest, being realistic for Wisconsin to land. So, they were able to get a lot of guys on campus. Braden Wilmer is another kid that I think this was his third time on campus. He went in June, July, and now for this game. So, again, if there's been one kind of storyline around this team about, big picture stuff, it's that, they've recruited very well, and I think they'll continue to do so. And they've done a really nice job laying the groundwork in this 2026 class. When I did that preview, a lot of these top kids now have been on campus 2 times, 3 times, and even like 4 times. So I think the staff has done a really nice job of identifying early, getting these kids on campus and putting the Badgers in a good position to get official visits from them when that time comes in a couple months here.
Let's go from on the field of the Alabama game to Wisconsin high school football action, John. Last weekend, I know you were out and about a little bit more. Anything that really sort of caught your eye last weekend, or that you're particularly looking forward to this weekend? I know you're going to try to go see Cooper Catalano break the tackles record as Germantown takes on Brookfield East, I think.
Yeah, one of the bigger matchups last week, Muskego against McGuanago, and McGuanago came out on top there. And I know that something that you kind of had written down, Matt, is another big game for Muskego coming up against Arrowhead. I think all three of those teams that you mentioned, or I mentioned right there, you could see in Madison in Camp Randall at the end of the season. And that just kind of speaks to the conference of just kind of how loaded that conference is. And, you never really get a week off there. So Muskego's got a real tough one against Arrowhead. And, the loser of that game will now have two losses on the season, which is, not really indicative of any talent or anything. It's just really the schedule and how that's played out early on. You look at a team like Verona is now 4-0. Obviously, Trey Poteet leads that team. Kimberly's up there, obviously, perennial powerhouse. Franklin's undefeated again. So it's kind of the who's who of every year, in that Division I field who's up there. And then, like you mentioned, Germantown, they're 3-1 after a loss to Marquette, but that's a team that's really kind of turned things around from last year. I think largely because, a lot of their guys are healthy this year. So, hopefully getting out to see Cooper on Friday night. And I think he's in a position to potentially break that career tackling record, what I think will be obviously a very, very special moment for him and his family. And I'm just hoping to be a part of it in the stands and catch up to him when it all kind of unfolds at the end.
Well, that'll definitely be a cool thing to take part of, because I know that, like you said, it's going to be a very special moment. Like he is he's going to finish his career as one of the legendary high school players in the state of Wisconsin, just from being so prolific on the defensive side of the ball. So I'm excited to hear about that. I'm excited to see if you get some film for that as well, John. But that is going to end up doing it here for us today on Badger Blitz TV. We appreciate everyone tuning in. Make sure that you subscribe to both the YouTube page, and if you haven't already, get in on the action at BadgerBlitz.com for the best information and message boards anywhere in the Badger universe. Until next time, he's John McNamara. I'm Matt Perkins, and we'll see you in the den.